Hey folks, Dustin Siggins here with Doyle and Robert, and we're going to be talking about sports analogies because a couple of months ago, Robert and myself and a couple of other colleagues were in a meeting, and my business partner brought up how in business you need to look at not where the puck is, but where the puck is going. And Robert was looking down and he looked up and he said, "Oh, thank God, a sports analogy." And I realized that like Robert loves sports analogies, like some people like to eat. And I've heard of sports analogies, but I never use them. And so, given the difficulty of a lot of PR practitioners in helping drive home what we do and the value for clients, we wanted to have a fun July 4th week conversation about sports analogies, maybe some tailgating stories from Robert, and kind of jump right into just kind of helping people see how sports analogies can be useful when speaking to prospects and clients. So Doyle, if you want to
Let's
introduce
kick
yourself.
this thing off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We'll just
Doyle,
get started. Yeah,
you're with Hawke Media now, right?
I'm with Hawke Media. I'm a managing director at Hawke Media, still focusing on public relations, but now full service. So excited to join you guys. And I'm ready to talk sports.
And Robert, how long have we been working together now? 2.5 years?
Working together, well, gosh, I mean, working together in different capacities, even longer than that, and friends for about the same amount of time. We've different organizations, and we've ended up kind of getting to a good place, and really excited about the future of Proven Media.
And you're also excited because I finally know how to use a sports analogy. So let,
We're getting there, yeah.
let's dive into your philosophy, Robert, on sports analogies.
Yeah, this is a fun conversation and exercise, but I think there's a philosophical or academic quotient that is important to us as communicators, and why this topic actually matters if we're in PR and communications. And I think that's because of how sports appeals to our human nature in this evolutionary, anthropological, almost martial way. There's this part of us as humans that's prone to just these awful things like war and conflict and fighting, and then we have these survival and maybe even hunting instincts that are violent in nature in a lot of ways. And I think we see that in the most primitive types of sports and organized competitions. Like a track and field event is who's the best at throwing spears or hurling rocks like the shot put. And the ancient Greeks are doing these in the Olympics, right? They, along with these other military exercises like chariot racing, wrestling in the sand, and we can't leave out the Romans with the gladiators. I mean, we might not agree with the blood sport, but we're looking at this military display of skill, and people eat it up across the centuries. Knights jousting, archery competition in the Middle Ages. It's this military martial display. It's not just the Western. It's not. This isn't Western civilization. Lacrosse starts in North America with the native peoples as a war training exercise that they play these games for days on fields that are just like miles long. And while there's sophistication now, the rugby team and football setup, that sphere of sport, it literally looks like armies on the battlefield. And American football comes out of the colleges between the Civil War and the Spanish American War. There's no need for this army, but everyone's concerned the young men of America are going to get soft if they don't do something rough. So they sort of encourage football in the colleges to develop this manliness. And we can go into the militaristic nature of like fans and chants and everything. But what does this mean for communication?
I have no idea. I'm glad you're going to get there. Thank you.
I think it's important because, like, obviously we're clearly drawn to whether participants or observers, and we agree on these lofty benefits like sports. You learn teamwork or discipline, and there's these aspirational qualities. And we've also so many have played on organized teams as kids, or even the neighborhood pickup playground game. And for this reason, because of that social consciousness and connection with sport, there's this relatability and it crosses every other social line. Everyone, I hate the platitude like sports is supposed to bring everybody together. I don't agree with it. It's the most divisive thing other than politics and religion that we have. It's where bad behavior happens in football stadiums, right? But think about the biggest sports market in the country. Where is it? It's in New York. Where is high school sports like a religion? Rural America, flyover country, the deep South. And so there's this quality that resonates with people everywhere across race, income level, and even intellectual levels. They all understand this universal language. And if we're writing a business story, we can say such and such company reports their EBITDA. Finance guys get it, but it might not mean anything to Joe's six pack. But if you say Walmart hit a home run in its last earnings, Joe Sixpack totally knows what you mean. He can jump on his app, buy his Walmart stock that day. And for that reason, it's so democratic when we talk in these terms, because the guy who doesn't understand the jargon or the technicalese gets the point. And the finance guy who knows the jargon, he doesn't care that it's lowbrow. And so that's this universal appeal of using a technique and that's why it's powerful.
Completely agree with you, Robert. I couldn't, and it's funny because when you take a step back and you're right, you could say that it's lowbrow, we're dumbing it down, we're not. And I completely disagree with that. I think we're making it relatable. And it's also even good for the finance guy. If he's just got time for a quick headline and he sees Walmart hit a home run, okay, I get it. They had a good report. I can come back to that in a little bit. And I've got it very, very quickly. And I think you're also right that it does transcend from Manhattan in New York to Manhattan, Kansas, right? And you can go all the way across. And usually people can understand it. And I think it's just a relatable analogy. It's like when we were all worried about MP3 players when they first came out, and this one was 256 megabytes, and this was the data transfer rate, and this was this, and this was that. And Steve Jobs walked on stage and said, "It's 1,000 songs in your pocket." And it was game over. The market ended at that moment, right? That the iPod took over. And I think a good sports analogy can do a lot of the same things. And I think they can also be inspiring. It's like, because you're talking about winning, you're talking about having a good time, you're talking that euphoria when your team pulls it out, in overtime. And it makes everybody feel good about what you're trying to convey.
Now, Doyle, you use a lot of those on LinkedIn. And what I like about it, the reason I kind of zeroed in on a lot of your content over the last, year or so that we've known each other, is it is that relatable component. It's so many PR people don't know how to use an analogy. We all used our jargon. And so, you're putting it on LinkedIn, but how do you see that actually coming to play, if you will, with clients? How do you use sports in that real business sense?
Exactly what we're talking about here, in that it's not always appropriate in a very serious press release to use a sports analogy, for example, but sometimes it's important to get the strategy across to the client. So one of my favorite things that I like to say is that the media can often act very much like a little kid's soccer team. Nobody plays positions, they just all run to the ball. And when the ball goes over there, they all run over there. And yeah, and that's true. I mean, once there's a feeding frenzy, once there's a news cycle, everybody's on top of it. And then the ball goes over here and they just completely forgot about that side of the field, right? And so that's a great way to explain to somebody without having to talk for 30 minutes about the importance of news cycles, the importance of joining them, understanding that if it's bad for you, that it's going to go beyond. And it's just a quick way to do it. And you usually get a smile because people can, say, and little kids are funny. Sometimes I end that with, nobody plays position. They all just run to the ball and somebody always cries. And that can sometimes be a fun end to that too.
Doyle, that's such a great example because I watch a little bit of golf. I'm a golfer like I am a skier. I have some of the equipment and I pay a lot of money to go do it. But no one's put me on the PGA Tour. I'm not. I could get in a lot of trouble going down a mountain too fast. But JJ Spawn just wins the U.S. Open, makes this incredible 60-foot putt to clinch it, and he's got this great story about almost quitting, and he's kind of this no namer, and he takes Rory McIlroy to overtime or to a playoff in the Players Championship earlier. And JJ Spawn has this moment, and the whole time I'm thinking, this is why there's this memory that we can capture with sports. I'm remembering this kid on the youth soccer fields when I was a kid. His name was JJ, and I remember his mom screaming, "Run, JJ, run, JJ!" So, and all the kids, it was that like the example you're using. All the kids are running after him in this giant mob, and so that memory of soccer is stuck with me to this memory of golf a few weeks ago, because again, it has all these emotional, relatable memories that really connect with us on so many different levels.
One of the
And you're
things.
right. Go ahead, Dustin.
No,
Sorry.
go, keep going.
I was just going to say that one of the things that I wanted to build on that you talked about earlier was it can bring people together, but it's also kind of tribal, but tribal in I think, a positive way for the most part. There's always the outliers that have to start fights in the stands and all those kinds of things. But I grew up in Nebraska, and even though my son grew up in Boulder, he's a rabid Nebraska fan because he learned early on in life that if he wanted to eat and have a place to sleep, that's what we do in this house. And so we road trip to one game to Lincoln every year, and neither one of us went to school there. And I sit in the stands every year, 91,000 people, and for 3 hours we are passionately aligned with what's happening. Outside of that stadium, the people I'm sitting around, we might agree on absolute. We might not even like each other, but for 3 hours, we come together and cheer on our boys and go forward with that. And I think that when it's not taken to extreme, I think that's a really healthy and positive thing.
I did a lot of sports growing up. I'm not gonna say I was an athlete. I did athletic things, not very skillfully. And so when I got older and I got away from, I didn't own a TV for years to save money, and I couldn't afford to go to the sports bar in my 20s. So I kind of got away from sports. But people, your age, Doyle, or older, will reference things from the time that I was a small child or before I was born. And we all get it. You don't have to know exactly who Bobby Orr is to get the hockey analogy. You don't have to know who Lombardi was in the details to get the strategic analogy. And I think to both of your points, there is that universality that allows the human condition to, if you're not military, you might not fully get a military analogy. You're not in politics, you might not get it for business, but everybody understands the fundamentals. Now, Robert, I do wonder though, how much of that is also within the American culture of sports versus a universality, because we spend so many untold hundreds of, billions and billions of dollars on football stadiums, for example.
Well, I mean, but we're not alone. I mean, one of the most compelling shows on Netflix, or a series on Netflix the last few years, is about the Six Nations rugby competition. It's fascinating for me to watch, because it's Scotland, Wales, Ireland, England, France, and Italy, and we don't have that rugby culture. But the series is very well done, and it's every team every spring or every winter plays each other. And it's a big competition. They only get 2 or 3 home games each year. I think the drama and the human interest, and Netflix does a good job of portraying that, is fascinating to me. So I disagree with the notion that it's not as applicable in other countries. Now, obviously, the sports cultures are different. Like we have this, college sports experience that's kind of ingrained in who we are growing up as we go through education. Again, a lot of that goes back to the development of American football through the colleges.
By the way, my wife is from Texas. She was horrified to realize we didn't have high school football, and not even like a 6-man team. And I said, well, my town is only 1,300 people, and the high school was 400 students for 4 grades from 6 towns. And she goes, Dustin, I grew up on a road that had no name and wasn't paved. Like, my school was small too, but it's in Texas. And there's always a marching band. There's always 6-man football. And where I'm from, we ski. Speaking of Robert.
Well, there's 2 things. And I think this is important, Dustin, because there is a bit of a cultural exchange. it is yes. The sports culture in the UK say is decidedly different than ours. Now there's some great content just from influencers who, these cross-cultural influencers, you get on their TikTok pages and they develop content of like, hey, I'm at this, I'm from the UK, but I'm at this American football game, or
Sure.
I'm from the US, I'm at this European soccer game, talking about the differences, the excitement, and you see the fans, and yeah, there's some differences, but I think that's why there's this academic side to analyze, and I can't answer this because I started off saying that there's an impact on language. Language is, I think we can all agree, language is sort of downstream from culture.
Right.
The things that are realities affect how we communicate. I mean, it's like calling things, chips versus crisps versus potato chips, French fries,
Jimmy's versus sprinkles, flats versus apartments.
right? So
Yep.
I can't answer that. I mean, that's just the UK, and I'm not using that example because they speak English.
Right.
I'm sure there's a relevance in a Spanish speaking country, or a non-English speaking, a non-Latinized alphabet country language that I would never understand, and probably is kind of like translating, where linguists say, the original translation in the original German is so much funnier. We just don't appreciate it. And I think that's relevant to those of us in communications, because it's the same question of, why do you study a foreign language? Well, obviously, it's nice to have that skill, but when you study a foreign language, you learn more about your own language. And so I suspect there's this relevance of learning language, learning communication that applies to sports across cultures and across languages.
That's the most I've heard Robert talk all at once the whole time I've known him.
I'm going to jump in and agree, because it's, I think about, the World Cup every 4 years, and the entire world stops, and we kind of go, is there some tournament going on somewhere? But you're right. It's different words, it's different rules, it's different games, but everybody gets that winning thing. And I think that's why the analogies work so well, because you can without having to overwrite, overspeak, you can translate excitement, you can translate the idea that, when we go into a public relations situation, we want to win, right? We want to have our point of view out there. And a sports analogy gets us there, and it gets us there very quickly. And I think, you do have to watch your audience a little bit. I said something to a client the other day. I said, well, it's 4th and 1 with 30 seconds left. What do you think? And he said, I don't watch football. I said, okay, let me try that again. But it was okay. It all worked out. And he said, no, I get it. You were very excited. So I understood that. But I think that it is, I think the other thing that happens too, and we talk about this in a broader sense in PR, is corporate speak. And when we get into a room together, it's kind of okay to just like, look, guys, this is serious. This is ugly.
Right.
This is fourth and goal with 10 seconds left on the clock. We got to get this thing done. And it kind of takes us out of that antiseptic business speak, and it kind of gets the team rallied around a little bit. And one of my big things was always, when we're getting ready to go do a press conference or some really big thing, or going to go on stage or whatever, I would always say what my high school football coach said, and I'm going to clean this up a lot, but it's like, all right, let's go put the kids to bed and go find dinner. And it was just like, it was, and everybody knew, it's like, okay, Doyle's ready to go here. He's got his game on. And it's back to what you were saying, Robert. It's, we're not really going to get dinner, but we're going out to compete as though we were.
Doyle, I'm curious as to you could kind of fill in how you will. You just gave a great example. If there's any really super creative or meaningful analogies you have used or observed that kind of that really got to a deeper meaning, and maybe this is going to be slightly off topic, but I think it's kind of relevant to what we're. Let me just explain by saying, I'm at church, the busy season for a lot of churches as far as operations goes, it's Christmas time. You've got the Advent season. You have more people coming in from out of town, usually a big Christmas concert. And I'm in the choir at my church. And we have several events and then this big concert right with the week before Christmas. And one of the ladies is saying, hey, everyone buckle up. This is the Super Bowl. Like, no complaining, even if you're tired. I said, well, technically on matters of doctrine, this is kind of opening day. Easter weekend's the Super Bowl.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
you know what? Yeah, that's actually more accurate. And so there was this way of communicating the story of the God Christmas through Easter in this one simple sports analogy that I think that's A, why it's so powerful, but B, I'm just curious if you off the top of your head you could connect those any kind of analogies you've heard in the past that have been like, wow, that reached a different level of communicating something more than the information in front of us and just the sports analogy.
And I'm going to give credit to my mentor, Joe Fuentes, who we lost to cancer a decade or so ago, but he was my boss at one of my first jobs at Coors Brewing Company. And so we had a team around us, and Joe used to say, and Joe loves sports. Monday mornings were go down to coffee and dissect the Broncos and, just go through every little piece. And Joe used to say, I want you to remember that on this team, I'm not the quarterback. I'm the offensive line. It's my job to get stuff out of the way so you guys can run the ball and do what you're supposed to do. And we had one guy on the team who was like, I think I understand that, but I'm not sure. Again, knowing your audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we all got it. And I always thought that was a really good way to put things. And, as I've managed teams, it's like, look, if I could do this all myself, I would, and I'd send you all home and I'll keep all the money. But that's not how it works. And so my job is to make sure that have a hole to hit, run through it, whatever the sports analogy is, make a good pass on the ice to get the assist. That's the important thing for a leader to demonstrate. It's the leaders eat last philosophy, right? And I think when using a football analogy, even for somebody that doesn't really follow football or a sports analogy, they get it. And I think when you're into it, you naturally become a little bit more animated when you talk about it. So people see it's like, this is important, this is cool. And you're not trying to hype up a bland topic. You're really taking a fun topic and saying, let's go get this done.
Well, I actually use a Tom Brady analogy to help people understand strategy, because a lot of people don't understand the difference between a goal, a strategy, a tactic, and the process by which those three things help each other, achieve the goal. So I'll say that, when Tom Brady went to the Buccaneers, the strategy was build the team around Tom Brady. That was the strategy. And the tactics involved getting Tom Brady as a quarterback, getting people who could block for him, getting people who could catch the ball. Those are all the tactics built around that. Eventually, I'll have to upgrade the Tom Brady analogy because at some point people won't know who he is. But at the end of the day, everyone understands what a quarterback does. And again, being from New England, my father raised me on Larry Bird. Larry Bird, Larry Bird, Larry Bird. The 5 Larry Birds would have made a terrible Boston Celtics team in the 80s. And that, I say that and everyone gets it. No one even has to know who Larry Bird is. They just know 5 of the same people can't run a company, can't run a strategy, because you need people with different skills, thought processes, and experiences.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Dustin. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna make a comment, maybe to bring this back around for hopefully nobody has turned this off and gone, I didn't know it was all about sports. But I've had
we did
a couple of that's true. But I think that sports, we saw this start with boxing. I will land this plane, I promise. And it's moving on now. There was a sizable piece that I listened to the other day that talked about how if you're a sports fan of a particular team or even a particular division in college, whatever the case might be, you might have to buy 3 or 4 streaming packages to get every game. And which one is it and how much am I going to pay and what's going on here? And I think the more that we put these pastimes and these societal unifiers behind, I'll call them paywalls versus firewalls, because just some people can't afford to do it. But you can go see the Colorado Rockies for a couple of bucks. Not that that's really baseball this year, but I think it's important that we keep this here. And the comment I made about boxing was in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, arguably 70s, the heavyweight champion of the world was arguably the most recognizable single athlete on the planet. I
Mhm.
couldn't, what are there, 4 or 5 divisions now? I couldn't tell you a single heavyweight champion today. And I'm a boxing fan. And it's because boxing put itself so far behind paywalls that
Yep.
I grew up watching
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali fight on Friday nights, and Howard Cosell called it on ABC. And I watched with my dad, and it was there. And it just, you
Yep.
didn't even have to have cable to get it. And then all of a sudden it was $30, it was $100, whatever it was. And I think that, I watch the NFL and the NBA, and people start to play with different things. It's like, I get monetizing your business, but you are messing with culture if you take it too far. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And then on the good side of that, I will say all of this streaming and everything, it used to be when I was a kid growing up, Nebraska was on TV usually for one non-conference game in Nebraska, Oklahoma, and a bowl game. And University of Southern Florida was never on TV. And, and now you've got, if you were a kid that wanted to go pro, you had to go Ohio State, Texas, Nebraska, Penn State, USC. Now every team's on TV and you can
Yeah.
see it. And I think that's really leveled the playing field as
Yeah,
far as
versus
exposure goes.
Notre
Well,
Dame being on NBC
Yeah,
every
they had their own
single
contract.
Saturday.
Yeah.
well, and Robert, you wrote that piece about March Madness. Doyle, we found an outlet called Sports Business Journal. And whenever we're just feeling like we want to write something about sports, we publish it there. And Robert had this phenomenal piece on March Madness and how that applies to the world of marketing and branding. When people are shutting down their whole workspace because like you said about soccer, I was in the National Guard, and one week we were at drill, and I'm like, why is nobody working? Well, I didn't realize like half my unit was Hispanic, and a lot of people were from Africa. All they were doing was watching soccer, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm gonna get paid to not work for a couple of days. This is great. I didn't care about soccer, but by the same token, Robert, you use that analogy to say that when your brand grows so big that people outside of your industry, outside of not even just your target audience, but outside the industry you're targeting, know who you are and look forward to seeing you. Well, you wrote a whole essay on that concept.
Yeah. Well, and I think there are, because of the way the relatability and that universal terminology and connection that we get through the language of sports, it helps us explain business concepts into a really granular level. And Dustin's going to know about this, but Doyle, I'll introduce you to this conversation we have that's almost become a running joke. It's my one-liner, which is everything is sales.
Yes.
And this came though from my time in the nonprofit world, which was trying to get the team on board with everything is fundraising. We have to have fundraising to keep the lights on. And I use this story, and this is where it all comes from, of Nick Saban on his first day at the University of Alabama. He has this staff meeting and says, everything we do is about recruiting. And for me, there was this light switch of, wait, I understand now why he's an effective coach, because he has narrowed down this entire multi hundreds of millions of dollars athletic program and said there's one thing that makes us successful. It's recruiting. It's the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. But we are organizing and orienting our operation so that everything is focused on accomplishing this recruiting task. And that means even the landscaping crew is part of the recruiting process. Even the person answering the phones and the football office is part of the recruiting process. And they need to be keyed in on that, because we are marketing to that individual, that 17-year-old who might come, that we really need, because if we don't get him, we're not going to win championships. And that's our end goal. That's us staying in business. And that it's not, we kind of I like it because it's recruiting, but it's the same principle as sales.
Mhm.
It's the same principle as I want the person answering the phone in my office to think that whoever calls is potentially going to buy something, going to buy our service, and I want them to treat them like a potential customer. And in nonprofit, it's not sales, but it's fundraising. I want us to develop the communications we put out, the product we put out, the service we provide. We were a nonprofit research group. I said, we have to orient our research in a package so that the potential donor sees it and says, yes, I want to fund this research. And so there's this taking for me, it was taking this analogy, the story about Nick Saban, and say this has a universal application to operations across different types of industries, of getting to this one thing. I call it everything is sales, but it's such a perfect example, and it really has that method of focusing us on, well, yeah, you know what, even the HR department has a role in the sales process, because hey, they need to keep our sales team happy. Keep them wanting to work here, because we need that sales team to produce.
That is such a spot on analogy. I was with a $2 billion plus data storage company for a number of years. And I kind of found out, I was running the PR department, that we were getting all these applications in. And if we didn't want to talk to them, they just never heard from us again. And I said, couldn't we just send a postcard, just that, even if it's pre-printed, that says, hey, got your resume, if we need something, we'll reach out.
Mhm.
And they're like, yeah, but that's, it's a pain and it's expensive. I said, yeah, but these are people that are engineers. That means they go to, back in the day, a CompUSA or a Best Buy or whatever it is, and they're going to have their choice of hard disk drives to choose from. And they're going to be standing there and they're going to go, I applied with that one and I never even got the courtesy of a response. This guy at least got back to me. I'm going to go with that one. And so when you've got that singular focus that goes through, and it doesn't become difficult. Not everybody has to be a salesperson. Everybody has to be a marketing person or a communicator. It's just like, how could I do my job in such a way that at the very least doesn't hurt our sales, and at best could actually move things forward, and to keep that allows people to make really good decisions for the most part. And if somebody makes a mistake, it's an honest mistake versus, I had no idea what to tell the guy. It's
It just hit me too, as I was thinking through, you guys have a much greater, broader and deeper knowledge of sports than I do. Again, as a kid, I read the newspaper every day, knew who all the leaders were. Today, the last time you mentioned the boxing, when did Floyd Mayweather retire for the second or third time?
years ago. So
But
yeah.
But when we talk to our prospects and our clients, I always talk about how we aim for scratch singles and doubles with most of our press that we get for clients. It's rare we're going to hit a home run. It's even rare to hit a grand slam. We're just going to do scratch singles and doubles. And that automatically gets across that, one, if they don't want that, like we had one recent prospect say, well, our clients want to know you're always going to swing for the home run. You know what? Not the best fit. You don't understand PR the way we do, or your philosophy is different. And for 95% of people in the PR marketing, the comm space, oh, good. We all agree. That simple analogy, everyone understands you're not always going to hit a home run.
You're exactly right. Yeah, and it just brings. I think that's our theme today: is how do you take something that we've all worked on for
Right.
decades
Yep.
into a sentence, and it's an art form, and we should be proud of the fact that we can do it. And so when you can pull analogies together that are unifying from our culture, like we said, even my client that doesn't follow football got the idea that this was important. I was excited about it, and we needed to move quickly. And okay, problem solved.
There you go. All right. It's my kid's birthday, and I promised my wife I'd be done at 3 today instead of 5:30. So I'm gonna have to let
All
you
right.
guys go a little early today. My number 4 is turning 2. So
Very cool.
yeah,
Congratulations.
Dustin is a basketball coach.
yes. Five daughters. So
throw that in. Girls basketball. He's got a girls basketball
girls
team.
basketball coach. And the hope is we turn the basement into the convent before too long. I don't want the colleges recruiting them and stealing them away and making college expensive.
Well, have so much fun. I think I do hear the bell, so it's time for us to call it.
Doyle, this
I
was
tried to
fun.
sneak in one more.
Nice
It was
to chat,
awkward.
dude. Yeah, this was fun, guys. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Have a happy 4th.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting it
Had
together.
fun.
You too.
See you.
Bye.
Bye bye.